Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Tuesday, April 15th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, and a special guest, Lance Brozdowski, joins the show today. You've seen Lance on Marquee Sports. He's the player development analyst there. You've probably read his Substack, lancebroz.substack.com, or you've seen him on YouTube, if not all three of those places. Lance, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I listen to this podcast pretty religiously, so it's really cool to be on it in a more featured sense. I think you guys had me on as a winter meetings, kind of how did you get into baseball person, but this is an honor to be on the mantle here with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming back around. Thanks for joining us the first time. It was kind of an experimental thing we did at the winter meetings, just talking to people about their paths into the game. You can check that out on our YouTube channel. Lots of interesting interviews from folks in a variety of different roles. And Lance, you're at the forefront of new pitches. You write about them extensively. You break a lot of interesting things down on YouTube. And one thing we want to talk about with you today are new pitches that are going to have a long-term impact. Sometimes pitches show up and they disappear and we never hear from them again, or they show up and they don't make that much of an impact. So we're going to try to cut through a lot of the noise. We're going to look at the AAA level, talk about a few pitchers that are standing out in a good way there, and answer some bigger questions like how long does an edge last at the MLB level in 2025? You figure something out as an organization. Is it a good thing tactically for a year? Is it a good thing for a month? How long does it take for the rest of the league to catch up? So all those topics coming up over the course of this show. Let's dig into some of the new pitches this year, though. We're just going to leave this as kind of an open book sort of question for you, Lance. Among the new pitches you've seen, there's tons of them that you've written about. What has stood out to you as something that's going to be a good long-term addition to an arsenal?
Yeah, I'll start with Max Fried. I think the Yankees are one of the teams that's on the forefront of some of the seam effect stuff and being able to optimize orientation to pick up shapes that guys hadn't normally been able to capture. And Max Fried is doing some fun stuff with his sinker. You guys have it, Stuff Plus has it jumping from a 104 to a 114 year over year, which is a pretty substantial jump on a pitch that he doesn't throw a ton to right-handed hitters. But I mean, this is like an optimal approach here from like a how do you make a pitch better standpoint. He's throwing at the same velo and he cut 5 inches of induced vert off it. So it's dropping more. That's like the lower induced vertical break number means more drop. And that's pretty considerable, like his command of it still looks good. He's zoning the pitch a ton. The overall Stuff Plus, in your model looks like the same for him, but the Yankees have done some interesting things in terms of just redistributing parts of his mix. I don't know if you noticed, but he's throwing like a true four-seamer with arm side now. And it's actually in there. And then the cutter is the four seam that he was throwing last year. So they played around some weird stuff here. I would say maybe some of the guys I get into here are almost more like wholesale. I'm doing this differently versus a specific handedness as opposed to like one new pitch. Those guys I just think are more interesting from like, wow, you changed a lot standpoint. But I mean, early going, swinging strike rates up, strikeouts and walks are in alignment and looking really good. I wonder if they can access like a higher level of Max Fried where he's still that random number generator, throwing 5 pitches, 10% plus to one-handedness. But these like subtle adjustments where we now have a true four seam, the sinker's there. It seems like they cut out the in-between slider and are only throwing the sweeper, kind of make him a really deadly weapon for them from the left side and needed given Cole's out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because I do think it showcases how good they are and how smart they are. Some of these things are a little bit counterintuitive. Like you just mentioned, the going more towards the sweeper shape. He's a lefty-hander.
Yeah, right. I thought that was weird.
So he's throwing like a 19-inch horizontal break sweeper, lefty on righty, and it's working. It's definitely not like the Chris Sale arm slot or anything. So I'm a little surprised that that's the move, but they must like what they're doing. I mean, what I have noticed sometimes in the stuff models really still like sweepers a lot, and I wonder if they overvalue them. That's part of a conversation we'll have later when we talk about edge. But what I'll find is that, like, for example, Tanner Houck, the only pitch that he has that's above average righty on lefty is the sweeper, because it's so good overall that even though it has a big split, it's still above average. So maybe they just thought, hey, your sweeper's just better than your slider. And even when we look at the splits, because they'll have platoon split Stuff Plus just like we do. And, they'll say, hey, even with it being worse, it's better than your other slider. So that must be the kind of math that they're doing. Also, the change is good, and maybe the feel is better on the sweeper, whatever it is. the sinker being better is another thing. It's like, okay, you've done two things now that you would tell the lefty to do against lefties. And your swing strike rate's through the roof, and you finally have the strikeout rate. Yeah, that's another thing with Max Fried is I've always liked him, but not loved him because he's been doing all this at sort of a 23% strikeout rate for his career. And you kind of be like, can he really keep up an ERA in the 2s and low 3s with a 23% strikeout rate? And he's just managed to do it so far. If he can keep the home run rate where it's been and the batting average on balls in play where it's been and just add strikeouts, like this could be a Cy Young type season for him.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing too with Fried, as I was looking at the movement profile charts at Savant, the sinker used to do what sinkers often do, and now it doesn't, right? So you see that that kind of shadowy, the circles with the lines through them on that chart. He's outside of that range now too. Yeah, that expected movement has changed for him as well. And I think the way that pitch interacts with his changeup, it's probably just a better combo now working with those two pitches as the sinker's been redesigned. It's one of those things that's pretty subtle though. If I didn't have you talking about it, I don't think I would have looked and noticed it. So I think that's a big deal as far as Fried trying to survive Yankee Stadium for half the starts too. I mean, that's the other challenge. Leaving Atlanta, going there, it's a much more difficult place to pitch. Let's talk about Dylan.
Curveball too, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. It's just 2 more inches of drop, and it's got less. It got more horizontal. Like it's more two plane. Like I don't know. They changed a lot, and sometimes when you talk to guys when they change a lot like this, it's actually something mechanical. But I would think that with that sinker is a new grip. It's got to be a new grip.
Let's talk about Dylan Cease for a bit. We didn't love the old Dylan Cease changeup, which if you're watching on YouTube, we'll have on there. It's
what is that?
Come on. It looks like he's just babying it. Just like, look at his body language. If I saw that as a hitter.
He's just doing it to get a laugh. Or still in the booth or something, right?
Right. Like there's a bet. Hey, we bet you $1,000 you won't actually throw that changeup in a game. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, there has to be some backstory like that because
I did ask him about it. He said it was an amuse-bouche. He said it was a which is actually a misuse. It's because that's supposed to amuse your mouth at the beginning of a meal. That's supposed to be kind of like a pre-appetizer. He said it's a change of pace, so he just thought it was just to shake things up,
just to throw off timing for the rest of the sequence because it's nothing like
because they're laughing at you, Dylan.
It's probably hard to hit.
I guess if you do make the hitter laugh, that might work.
Yeah. All right. So he's changed the change. Like let's see the new one just as a comparison.
Yeah, arm speed there immediately, right?
Yeah,
if you watch on YouTube, you see it. It's like immediate.
Yeah, he's not babying that pitch quite as much. That's not the only adjustment that Dylan Cease made. He's also changed the sinker. Again, I wonder how important it is to keep those pitches working in a way where they play off of each other as efficiently as possible, sort of to just maximize the benefits of having both of them in your arsenal.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think like if you look at like heat maps for him and just see like where he's locating things. Like I often feel like the glass now types that are very like vertical cut, like we're cut riding, we're throwing a slider off that, then there's a big curve on that. It's like, they're kind of like very north. I mean, they're north-south guys. Like that's pretty intuitive based on their slot, right? So I've always I've been very attracted to the guys who are able to get some kind of arm side separation or at least a little bit of depth separation from that vertical plane. Such that like you think about his approach to righties, it's like, okay, if I start throwing the sinker now, I have something that maybe runs a little more inside, such that if my four seam is kind of like cutting up away and then I have the slider down away, like I'm now just pitching to a different half of the plate that I never threw to. And it's the same idea with the changeup, right? Like let me take a look at his plots versus lefties, but like I think it's the same idea. Like he's up with the four seam and then he's trying to go down with everything else. Yeah, it lines up right, like kind of up away with the four seam and then everything else is roughly down in the zone. Whereas if you could throw a changeup now, you have something arm side away. As much as like we dig into stuff and locations and stuff like that, I think sometimes one of the things I do a ton of my Substack is just look at like, where are you covering in the zone? This was like the old Skeens thing in spring training. Like I was trying to think of why he would add a cutter in his two seam. And then you just look at his plots and it's like, oh, those two pitches, if centered, would move towards the parts that he wasn't throwing to versus lefties and righties. So I get this evolution for Cease of like wanting the concept of getting a sinker and getting a changeup, help versus lefties, help versus righties. I'll say, like, I don't love the shape on either. Like, I would think, like, the changeup one we're laughing at here, it's a troll pitch. And the idea, I'm wondering whether every year he adds like 8 ticks to it, such that next year it'll be like mid 80s. And then finally it's like, oh, he's throwing a hard changeup finally. And it looks amazing. It just took him 4 years. But the sinker, too, like we were just talking about Fried, he cuts the ball. And Rodon's another guy on the Yankees who they adjusted the sinker on. He doesn't cut the ball. He's very efficient. But yeah, the Yankees were still able to get a ton of vertical separation on their sinker relative to their fastball with Rodon and Fried. And I think Nieba's a great pitching coach. I just wonder, like, how is he not able to get a little more depth? You know, this is something that's probably out of my realm of, like, you got to ask a pitching coach or someone. But I look at his spin efficiency on the four seam and the cut that he has, and I look at the concept that around seam effects, the more gyro you have on these more fastball shapes, the more you usually can create separation from that expectation DVR was talking about. So I almost wonder whether, like, I like the concept of these two things, and I think they could really evolve him as a pitcher, but, you know, is he, like, bad in the execution of them such that we're waiting for those shapes to be better and be more effective? Because neither of them are kind of world beaters right now, but conceptually they make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm baffled that Stuff Plus likes the shape of this changeup, because
that's crazy.
his changeup has like 1 inch more drop than his four seam, and only 4 inches more vertical of horizontal break. You know what it is though? It's a rare straight change, you know. And then with the straight change, you're actually supposed to have movement that's kind of close to your fastball and have a large velo gap. So like with a 20 mile an hour velo gap, I guess he's throwing the Marco Estrada straight change out there. I remain skeptical, and part of why I remain skeptical is because of what you said about about actually putting these into place. Because if you look at the changeup heat map on Savant, I'd say more than half of these are in the top half of the zone. Like, he's not burying it. He looks like he's aiming for the top of the zone, and sometimes it just goes to the top of the zone. And I mean, that's what people say about hanging changeups. Maybe the velo differential will just get a lot of takes, you know, because that's something that Baseball Prospectus found when they looked at, or actually it was Driveline found that when they did mix and match, they found like the things that deviate the most in terms of velocity or shape create called strikes, because the hitter will see the huge curveball, you know, that looks totally different. And they'll probably see this changeup, even though the arm speed's a little better. They'll probably see that's coming out 77, you know, and not 97 pretty quickly. And I think their instinct as a hitter will be to not swing. So,
and I think your point about the changeup being up is one that I think is intuitive based on the shape too, because he's like way behind it. Like on that right side of your screen, you see those green dots. Like, there's no separation from the four seam. So I think a lot of times we think about how like movement, like the actual measured movement can change slightly based on location, which is likely just a byproduct of how the guy is moving into release there. I think, you know, you've mentioned this in the past about like Hunter Brown and stuff, but it makes sense. Like if he has a ton of backspin on his changeup, I don't really see how he's going to get it down in the zone unless he aims at the plate, maybe. Like you think of that intuitively from a targeting standpoint. Of like, if he's going middle setup and his changeup has a ton of vert, like it's going to end up middle to up in the zone. So that gets back to my point of like, is there something here that can kill more spin to get him down in the zone or down away running arm side?
Or, you know, or maybe the sinker is the more important one, because what we need from him is something that works in the zone. Like, obviously, you know, we need something that works in the zone. Maybe the changeup can be it if he's getting called strikes, you know, and he's just dumping those in like EFI, basically, just throwing some EFISs, EFI, whatever it is, into the
plural
zone.
In EFIS? I didn't even know.
I
love EFI. I think we should allow that. Thumbs up.
Or he's dumping sinkers in there because he just needs something. He gets too fastball slider, and sometimes he loses command of the four seam. And when he loses command of the four seam, he has to go to the slider. The hitter knows it's 2-0. He has to go to the slider because he can't command his four seam. You know, those days like that. And that's when Cease has the bad day. So if Cease could be like, hey, it's 2-0, but here's a sinker and it's in the zone, then that, so basically I want to gift him a pitch he can command no matter what it is. And I don't think necessarily either of these is it. Maybe the sinker.
What's the long-term outcome for Dylan Cease, right? I mean, I think that's the other part of this. Like, clearly he's trying to tinker, trying to do different things. And having varying levels of success. I mean, I'm surprised he's got a 108 in the location plus model, because I never think of him as a guy that has anything more than average at best command. Like I always feel like Dylan Cease is a liability for free passes. And it's not quite to me the same as Blake Snell. I've made comparisons in the past, whereas like Snell has elite hit suppression and is almost choosing not to throw strikes and willing to give up the walk. I don't feel like Cease is quite as extreme in that regard. So, think about him as a guy that he's a free agent at the end of this season. What does his offseason deal look like? Like how many years are you giving Dylan Cease? How much money are you giving Dylan Cease given the flaws, even though he's had a lot of success despite those flaws at various points?
I bet you on the contract. It's a really good question.
I bet you it's the Yankees or Dodgers and they have a plan.
That's the sneaky one, right? Where it's like, he only got that much, and then like, whoa, look at these improvements. He was worth so much more. So that gets back to our point here. Like maybe Pryor and McGinnis with the Dodgers are staring at this and going, yep, I know exactly what to do. Like he's not trying this orientation or grip or cue. And like we're pretty sure we could get him into like a nasty change or sink right off the top and do it in 2 weeks. Like that's I would be intimidated if I was the NL West.
The worst case scenario, I think, is he takes more money from a organization that doesn't have a plan. And then, let's say I like picking on them. So the Angels sign him.
I like picking on the Angels too.
I think that they don't value player development. So, and I do. So, they deserve it, I think, to some extent. And so, what you can do, what you see is a future where he signs with the Angels. They don't really have a plan other than they're like, hey, let's just get back to who you are at your core. You're a fastball slider guy. Let's just do that. And then what happens is, I believe you're right, Derek, in that the location plus can overvalue being in the zone, because being in the zone is good. And location plus that's better than not being in the zone, right? And what you look back at his prospects report, Dylan Cease had a 40 present from on command from Fangraphs and a 45 future. So I kind of believe that more than almost location plus. And so what I think would happen if he goes to a team that doesn't have a great plan for him is that just the home runs come back up. The stuff that he was dealing with early in his career comes back and he starts having a home run rate 1.2, 1.3 starts going up. The walk rate starts going up because he's too locked into 2 pitches and he hasn't diversified beyond that in a way that he can harness and command. So as that velo drops too, the home run rate will increase unless he can really diversify his portfolio in a way that like he can actually execute and command.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and the wheels are spinning in my head just thinking about being able to command the entire strike zone. Like, you can get in the zone. Maybe you can control 2/3 of the zone, but if there's a third that you're missing, that could be a problem.
Yeah, as soon as they can keyhole you, I mean, especially for these vertical guys, right? If it's high, let it fly. Like, that's a knuckleball thing, but you could be like, oh, if it's high, it's a fastball. If it's low, it's a slider. Then you've got Dylan Cease figured out.
So Blake Snell last year got what, 5 for, I'm looking at right now, 5 for 182. Mm-hmm. It's like the third largest contract in last year's pitching market. Do you think he gets that, Dylan Cease? He's going to be 30 next year.
Yeah, he doesn't have the same injury history, and he has the same
so maybe a little bit over that
strikeout rate stuff combo. Like people are buying that.
Does he go to Burns 6 for 210?
Yeah,
right in that window feels good,
I think he's under that. I think he's under 210. He might get 6 years, but I think he's under 210.
That's what we're talking, I think, in there.
Yeah. I'm curious.
People thought that Burns didn't sign for as much as he could have.
Yeah, that's true because he wanted to be in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Max Meyer. I think this kind of falls more into the wholesale changes. A guy that looks like a completely different pitcher now, Lance. And what were the adjustments from Max Meyer, and why do you believe this is all going to work for him as he kind of carves out his role in that Marlins rotation?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially early in the offseason and in draft season, what I was looking at, I mean, projections are doing such a good job of nailing breakout picks, because you're looking at the guys like, oh, he didn't walk a lot. He's got a high strikeout rate, and like maybe the barrels could come down with better location. And, oh, well, look, he's projected for 2.5 WAR. So like he's probably going to be drafted in the first 10 rounds, and it doesn't matter. I can't call him a sleeper. But I think one thing projections don't do a great job of capturing is like this, like Max Meyer, like regime change. Like they wiped their entire pitching department and brought in a bunch of new people. A lot of those being very analytically inclined. So for me, I was just looking at all those arms and I was like, yep, like checks the box. I'm going to take these guys everywhere, because it's like, especially at the cost you're giving me, I thought at the time was one of the few who was believing in what they would do from a philosophical standpoint, pulling down, forcing usage on certain guys, spotting obvious usage increases. Edward Cabrera with his slider, already he's throwing that more. The thing's nasty. Meyer was a great example, just like throwing a fastball right over the middle of the plate that wasn't good. And it was like, my God, like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And it's like the second you turn the page and look at his spring stats, it was like, okay, four seams down versus righties from 45% last year to 15% this year. That is a massive adjustment. They made the sinker better. He's throwing that as almost his primary now in tandem with the slider. They gave him a bigger sweeper. They optimized the changeup. I didn't actually spot a grip difference here from what I was looking at, but that thing's got like 6 inches more drop again at same velo. We were talking about that in relation to Fried, where it's like that's kind of a very high level thing on the pitch design side. Is just like, are you throwing the same velo? Does it have more movement? And the slot's the same. It's like, good, that checks a lot of boxes. We'll move forward, and we like that more.
I mean, look at all these changes.
Yeah, he jumped his righty swinging strike from 11% up to 18% right now. I always thought this slider was good. It was good out of the draft when he was at Minnesota. It's this hard bullet. I know the model doesn't love it a ton. I'm curious, whether you think the model doesn't love these bullet sliders because of the platoon nature of them, where it's like, the sweeper, we were talking about with Hoke is like, okay, big lateral shape works versus righties. It's still average versus lefties. I wonder whether this shape in your model is just like, ooh, we really don't like that for righties, but we like it for lefties. But my litmus on these is like that yellow right in the center of the plot there is like, are you throwing it above 86, which, I think they say like 85 is the slider standard, but I've talked to some people in different orgs who say that's now 86. It's like, are you throwing it above, let's say 87, 88, and he's throwing his 90, it's like, I love that shape, like, especially with his inherent command of the offering. I know he's got good location plus right now.
I mean, to your point, yes, I've seen reverse platoon splits on gyro sliders in Stuff Plus, where the Stuff Plus will be higher on opposite handers. And so I think you might be right that, I don't overvalue, undervalue, I don't know. But there are people who throw things like this that don't get many whiffs from righties, like right on right.
It's a good point, yeah.
And so Meyer, I think, to some extent, just has touch on the pitch beyond just the stuff of the pitch. And the way that I can sort of demonstrate that is the location plus on his slider for his career is almost 110.
That's awesome.
That's something. Location plus is something that doesn't really work in small samples. But when you see somebody that, has this reputation over multiple years, you can start to believe it. And being able to locate the slider, I think, is almost as important as the shape of it itself. And that gives him now, it's back to the sort of 2-0 count thing is like, he doesn't have to be predictable in 2-0 counts. He doesn't have to throw the fastball over the plate. He can throw that slider over the plate. And increasingly now he has other options. So I agree with you that, that when you see wholesale change like that, it's pretty impressive to pull it off in 1 year. I mean, he changed his arm angle, all these things that he did. And it's funny that he's not come out the other end as he still doesn't necessarily look like a 1-1 pick all the way, but
true.
But a 26, I mean, I don't know if he's 1-1, maybe he's 1-3 or something.
1-3, yeah.
1-3, yeah, 1-3. But 26% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate. Like maybe this is, him finally just coming through on his promise. And I think it also speaks to just how difficult it is to make it as a starting pitcher in the big leagues. It just takes a while to, put it all together. You can have a pitch that, like the slider from Max Meyer, that's been great, through college. It got you drafted 1-3. And then you get to the big leagues and you're like, yeah, so what? You got one good pitch. What else you got going? and it just takes it a while. But having one good pitch, if you are looking for buy low, like we were just having this discussion about Tomoyuki Sugano on yesterday's podcast, which is, the difference between Seth Lugo and Tomoyuki Sugano is that Seth Lugo has an out pitch, and I'm not sure that Sugano has a single out pitch, at least in the major leagues here. So if you're looking for somebody, that could be a future starter, it's a buy low. We can do an episode on this, but like if you're looking future Max Myers, what did Max Meyer have? He had an out pitch. He had one pitch. He had one golden pitch, and then they finally rearranged the pieces around it. And I think, that's a key in almost every breakout I've seen, even if we're talking about like Cease or who are the guys we've talked about so far, Cease and I've got a golden pitch brain. Fried. I mean, Fried came up. His one golden pitch was the curve. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And all the stuff that has happened since has just been, oh, well, he can spin it. Look at how good his curveball is. And, he's figured everything else out around it. So anyway, Meyer. Yes, I agree. I think Meyer, all these guys need to be owned in all leagues. And I think Cease is actually a buy low just based on it's this year. And like, he's still got the stuff, he's going to strike guys out. He's going to have better days before going forward.
Well, and I got the sense, thinking about the way you were talking about a smart team, seeing things in Dylan Cease, wanting to pursue him in free agency, like the long-term value outlook might be better. It might be more consistent in the future. He doesn't have that durability track record. He's at that age in keeper and dynasty leagues where a non-contending team is going to say, I'm going to get off this train now just because I'd rather cash out while I can. So there could be a real long-term buying opportunity there. With Meyer,
and the projections haven't necessarily caught up yet. Like, that Jordan hasn't run. I don't think that we're updating these things as quickly as we can. So I don't want to speak for Jordan, but if the best projection rest of season is 4.10 ERA right now, I'm taking the under on that for Max Meyer.
Right. With Max Meyer, I think the only multi-year concern is building up innings. I think he topped out at 111 his first professional year with the Marlins. So you're probably looking at 150 or so this year, but the next year you're pretty close to every other starter in the league if he holds it physically. So I think there's an opportunity to get in on Max Meyer as well. Lance, we've talked about Joe Boyle a lot on this show over the years.
Keep this one short.
it has been an ongoing, could he just locate well enough to make the stuff work? And look,
worst location plus among starting pitchers with 5 innings so far this year.
Yeah,
not a big surprise.
and we know the Rays have had some success with the one target approach, guys that don't have great command, but this is probably their biggest test yet, I would say, trying to find something that will work. So what are we seeing in the changes they've made so far with Joe Boyle? And do you think this is actually going to work? Will Joe Boyle, starting pitcher, be a thing for the Rays for even a full big league season at some point?
Yeah, this is like can you get to the lowest tolerable level of command for a starting pitcher? And the name I come up with always last year was, I believe, Luis Heel had pretty poor command, but he survived and he pitched pretty well. I think the big thing here to me is again, we're talking about good player development orders. They had an approach here. He's not throwing the curve anymore. They cut out the sweeper. They were stop throwing your bigger shapes. It's not helping you.
Yeah, you can't command it.
Right. You're not
make it all tighter.
You throw so hard, your stuff's so good. We could probably figure out other things that maybe you have some semblance of command of. So they cut those 2 pitches out. His strike rate's still low. The location plus is terrible. I get it. But the sinker, your model loves it. It was a 129. I think I threw up on my Twitter, the grip. It to me looks more like a standard split. Some of the splinkers we're seeing are, the Skeens one is in between the horseshoe, and Soriano and Joran Duran, those guys all throw them in a similar way. His is literally just a split, and his ring finger's way up on it. It's a nasty pitch. It from his arm angle, which he dropped year over year. So they made some mechanical changes there, from what I could tell. He's picking up a ton of drop. It's hard. There are not a lot of comps for the shape, whether you look at sinkers or splitters. The closest one is a guy I know likes, Jose Soriano. It's in that realm. It's just a really good pitch. Now, is it going to be in zone? Probably not. But I think that this is a guy where you can get some of these. What did he have? 5 innings, 1 base runner, 7 Ks the other day, and then he went back down to AAA, which the Rays are going to Ray. But But yeah, I mean, I think he's fascinating. Like again, I'm terrified on the location. And maybe as we pump him up here, he becomes probably a little bit overowned in leagues where it's like, oh, I'm just hunting this, good matchup. Like, is he a guy that's going to be matchup independent where it's like, it doesn't actually matter who he's facing. It more matters like what is his command on that day.
Yeah. How do you wake up this morning? Yeah.
Yeah. Or like lining up with teams that chase more maybe is the way as opposed to wholesale. Like, is this offense good?
Yeah.
Because he's going to run it. He's probably going to crush your whip. But I'm intrigued here enough because I think this sinker shaped splinker thing is really cool. And this is like a classic new pitch. Maybe it's a little less impact than we think, but it's so cool and it's unique that I had to highlight it. So I know you guys have talked about him a ton. I don't know if there's anything to add, but yeah.
Well, I do think that the splinker is important. Right now, he's got a real triangle going where he's got the four seam, the slider, and the splinker. If you're looking on a Savant, and the splinker has way more drop than a sinker. It's being classified as such. It as a splitter, it might be average-ish, but it's a little bit like the Hunter Green situation where you've got not great command, really, like strong fastball in terms of velo, and a shape that should be pretty platoon safe. A slider that's pretty platoon safe and 90 miles an hour. It's kind of a 90 mile an hour 0-0 jar slider. So, he's got a lot of ways to avoid platoon issues. So, and theoretically, a tight four seam and a tight slider like that should be easy to command. So they're really just they're simplifying the playbook. And his extension is down, his arm slot is down. Maybe in the past, I'd been suggesting that maybe in the past he was chasing extension and trying to get on top of the ball to get more ride, and they were just like, no, like let's find the most natural way for you to throw because we want you to kind of try to get it in this box, dude. So don't reach out there and try to get 7 feet of extension if that's going to make it harder for you to throw it in this box. So I will say in the minor leagues, 7 walks per 9 in AAA this year. So it could have just been one shining start that made us all into it. But like if you're in a 15 team keeper league and he's out on the wire and you've got some old veteran that you're just humping along and you're more closer to rebuilding, like, yeah, I'd pick him up. As a speculative ad, I'm into it. I went and looked in Devil's Rejects, our 20 team league, and he's owned. So
of course. Everyone's rostered in Devil's Rejects. Yeah, no one's available in that league ever.
Yeah.
Lance, a broader question for you, though. New pitches are fun. Like, we love new pitches. They're gifable. They're fun to write about. They're fun to talk about. Are you finding that the value they add comes more from the big picture and less from just the nastiness or the actual characteristics of the individual new pitches themselves?
100%. I agree. And I think that one of the things that I've almost become more interested in, it's interesting to see like my Substack's evolution. It started where I was like very stuff focused. I was literally doing like VLOOKUP differentials on stuff between like day to last month to prior year and just like noting who changed what and then trying to figure out why, which gave me a really good understanding of like what goes into those more 2-3 years ago stuff models, which are very more like basic Magnus movement, etc. So that like really helped me understand like shapes and everything. And then it evolved into more like, I actually think locations and usage are like super important relative to some of the shape changes and stuff. And that's kind of where I've landed. It's like, I think a lot of the time what we run into is like location change or usage change. Usage in particular is a really good way to like see a guy doing something different. Now there's always the cases where a guy changes location or usage and the results look identical. Like I think of like Zach Wheeler is a good example of this, where he's made, like you look at his last 4 years, he's changed a lot from a new pitch standpoint, but the line is like exactly the same. So it's like, okay, it's like a chicken or the egg. Like, did he change in order to sustain? Or like,
yeah, right. Is he staving off regression? Yeah, exactly.
So I think like the usage stuff is really what I've started to lock onto. And I think it's really important. And I got to say, like, this is a proposal for maybe your Jordan, your model, or, I've thought that like, I'm always like in draft season, I'm always thinking of like, where's my edge? And I think, again, I mentioned it earlier, but projections are so good that like the edges are kind of gone. I've wondered whether the edge now is predicting usage changes. I wonder if there's a way for you to build like a model or like a tool where you have the guy's usage from prior year and you have it aligned with his stuff. You make the assumption the stuff stays the same, and then you play around with the usage and see what the ultimate stuff outcome is. Like I saw this with Mackenzie Gore, where like I kind of had some info in the offseason that like he might pull down his fastball usage finally. So I was like, cool, like how do I capture the value of this? You know what I mean? Into a projection, as opposed to me just saying I'm going to draft him a round above value because I know he's not going to use as much fastball, and I generally think that's a good approach. But it'd be cool to like put almost like an objective number to it, where it's like, I think this will come down, and therefore now we think the strikeout rate will jump. Maybe if the walks jump, that's okay. But the net result here is, 0.2 points off his or 20 points off his ERA, and then we could be a little more aggressive in drafting him.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan just takes the stuff outputs and puts them into his model. So this is really a question for the Stuff Plus model, and there's a couple of real answers to this. One is, I mean, it is hard to model the effects, but there are a couple places where we can put the finger on the weight. And so the real example that I'm thinking of is, let's say somebody goes to the Mets and you're like, I know he's going to add a fastball. He's going to go to the Mets and he's going to add a sinker, or he's going to add a cutter or whatever. And so his fastball mix is going to be different. Now, one of the features in our model right now is previous fastball mix.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason we do this is the example has been Adam Ottavino, because Adam Ottavino throws a sinker and he also throws a four seam. He throws a four seam a little bit of the time. And people see the arm slot, they know he throws a sinker, and so they expect the sinker. And so it is a philosophical question, like, what is the true stuff of the four seam? Is it the true stuff of the four seam just by itself in the air? Then it's a bad four seam. But that's just not how pitching works. Everyone sees Adam Ottavino and they know, sinker. And they can even see the slot and say sinker, So we put previous fastball mix in as a marker to be like, oh, Adam Ottavino's four seam is actually pretty good at 10%. 10%, it's a 104 plus stuff plus four seamer, because they expect 0% of that. They expect sinker. And so it's a sort of about expectation and stuff. Well, since that is a feature in the model, I think we could just change the number.
Which I'd be curious to see, because like the Red Sox are another one, right? Like how many guys there in the last 2 calendar years with Breslow and Bailey coming in have just shaved their fastball and four seam usage, Like you could pretty confidently expect. Like I kind of knew Crochet would not throw his four seam as much. I wasn't sure exactly what would take over, and it seems like it's the cutter, but like there's certain orgs I think you go to, and it's very clear they prefer certain philosophies. And I just wonder whether we can like better capture results on guys or projections on guys.
I mean, because I was talking about this with like we could could we run the model where you throw the four seam 30% of the time and see what the stuff
what happens? Yeah.
I think it would drop. And so I think it might be as simple as that. It's more of a question from the guys that work on the models. We have Owen McGrattan and Matt Denowitz on the 1s and 2s over there. And right now, though, and this is important for our next segment, right now we are obsessed with the minor leagues and trying to figure out minor league data, because I mean, one thing is arm angle is important to our model. You don't get arm angle from minor league data. And then there's other pieces of missing data. And so we were trying to figure out what we do. And you can run a model with missing pieces. But if the missing piece is high enough in your feature ranking, then it's a big deal. So for us, arm angle is pretty high up, because the stuff model is talking about like, oh, you have this kind of an arm angle, we expect this kind of movement. So it's about expected movement, dead zone movement, all that sort of stuff. So arm angle is important for our model. We don't get in the minor leagues. We made a mini model that now takes available information and guesses what your arm angle is based on height, extension, X, release Y. And so now we have the ability to run the major league model on the minor leagues. Matt Denowitz did the heavy lifting on that. And so we, in the future, hope to be able to do some fun stuff where it's not just single A and triple A even. And because we now have a way to kind of guess the missing data and give you as robust a stuff model as we can, given the data that is actually available. So the first run right now, this is we've been looking. We sent you a file for AAA and single A with the arm angle imputed, not actually observed. And so that is a caveat whenever you're looking at minor league data. If you want to look at the minor league data and you say, this guy looks weird, his stuff plus is really high, but his results are really bad, go watch some video. Because if he has a strange arm angle or a really obvious arm angle, whatever, like if there's something strange about him, you might see it with your eyes. But we sent the file over to you and asked you, like, who were some names that sort of jumped off the page when you were looking at that file?
Yeah, for sure. It lined up good. I think it passed the sniff test overall, which is good. I have 4 names. I could just rip them off, or do you want me to walk through them one by one, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's just rip them all off and we'll kind of pick at them.
All right, cool. So Cade Horton is one top pitching prospect in the Cubs org, close to home for me, given I cover the Cubs for Marquee. He jumped in your model. He looks pretty good. We'll talk about him a little bit more. Blade Tidwell. I called him Blake Tidwell for about 2 years before I realized it was Blade. Another guy with the Mets. I don't necessarily know if he's going to get the next shot. It seems like they're going to bring up Sproat, but he jumped in your model.
Jeez, look at that. He's basically 110 stuff plus or north on all of his pitches.
Yeah. He's weird, too. We can talk about him a little more from what I see in like the shapes. Emiliano, I believe it is, Teodo, is a Ranger reliever, which is a fun like late season save speculation angle. He popped in your model. He does some weird stuff with his body, so I think you guys are doing a good job of like capturing height, extension, arm angle, which is what you're just saying. But I think he's a bit of a proof of concept there. And then Bubba Chandler, who everybody knows, is another one that pops in your model. So those are like kind of the 4 guys. I'd say Cade is, I can give a little more details because I was looking at year over year for him. I don't know if you guys reran this on 2024, but I would speculate he would be a guy that jumps a ton. He's up about tick and a half, 2 ticks. He's sitting 96. He was 94 last year. He added 3.5 inches to his 4-seamer, a vert. So he's like an extreme cut guy. He was like 13-0, if you understand like that lingo.
He was trying to do the cut ride.
Yeah, he is. He's a cut rider. He's extreme cut. He's got like 0 lateral on his. He's in that glass nowy angle, but he's weird because he doesn't like get to the side or around the ball well. So his shapes are lateral, So he's got like this sweeper, which added a bunch of sweep this with this change too. He's got like a tweener death ball downer curve, and then he's got a changeup that has like a bunch of horizontal separation. And coming out of college, he basically had no arm side pitch, and that was a big concern. It was like, well, he'll just be a 3 breaking ball guy, like you're cloning Drew Rasmussen. And then he ended up doing what Tanner Bybee does, where it's like, okay, I have horizontal separation as opposed to vertical separation. But he looks great. And the problem here is just he only threw 34 innings last year. He had like a subscap strain that shut him down. So like the innings total is really light, but with Steele going down, he becomes like kind of an interesting, how many bullets do you want to waste at AAA? They're probably going to backfill with like Assad and Wicks and Ray. But I mean, from my angle, like his stuff's good enough right now to compete, and your model backs that up. And he made some pretty dramatic changes. Talking to people in the org, like it seems like with some postural things in spring, they had like a bit of a mechanical intervention and changed some things. And whatever they did looks fantastic to me in the shapes, especially if you compare 24 to 25.
That's huge too, because Cade Horton's prospect stock, at least where he's ranked on a lot of lists, has fallen because of the lost time and the results last year too.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So this is a big rebound for him, and the Cubs need pitching. I think overall, I remember you guys talking on the preview of that team that they only had like Steele and Shoto were projected as above average pitchers and nobody else. So I think people are bullish on him in the Oregon. I think outside people should definitely recalibrate to what he was in 2023 as opposed to last year. We took a downtick, but again, the injuries are big here. Like on the fantasy side, I'm not entirely sure if he's like a stash because I don't know when he'll be up. And I don't even know if he comes up, it's more reliever because they want to like tamp down the innings, do the crochet thing where he throws 100 in total, but like it's a bunch of 2 innings late in the year for the final 2 months, which doesn't really become valuable for fantasy.
And we were speculating that, his ultimate use, that they're probably debating this internally right now, is that it could be in a trade for somebody like Sandy Alcantara, or, is he better used as that, where we get 3 years of a known commodity in Sandy Alcantara, or 6 years of like, maybe this is good. And sometimes you get this organizational fatigue where like, man, he's been hurt, and he comes to spring and he's looking all crazy, and we gotta change some stuff again. Yeah. And like, but there's people pounding the table in the org that are like, no, this guy's awesome, and like we need to keep him. So one thing that sticks out for me, and again, it's 22 sliders, so location plus is not online, but it's a really bad location plus on the slider so far. And I just wonder what your idea of his command is naturally, because you know, the Fangraphs prospect guys 40 present, 50 future command, and you look at his walk rates and they're all over the place. I mean, they're not all bad, and they're definitely not, we're not talking Edward Cabrerian, you know, but he has struggled with command from time to time, it looks like.
Yeah, that slider you're looking at, I don't remember in the sheet you sent me, but do you split it slider sweeper? Because I believe his downer curve is tagged as a slider, and then he has a sweeper.
Yeah, I don't know which. We have a slider and a curve in here. So
so the slider is probably the bigger sweeper. Then would be my guess, and then and that might be hard for him to command if he's just added it too, and he's been north south before. It's weird because he's had that pitch for, that was actually the pitch he got drafted on, was this nasty slider thing. So he had good like sublime feel for it, I thought. But the thing that I'm trying to reconcile is like, you know, if we were pulling up plots on Savant, right? Like he was very grouped around the center last year. And now everything is like shoot because of his mechanical change. Like he's getting more movement everywhere, you know, and it's like kind of odd to me. So I don't know if like this new sweeper foundation he has that is picking up 7 inches more lateral from what I see year over year. Like that's a lot on a sweeper. And I don't think he changed that grip, because that was a grip that he came up with in college that he was
it's going to take him some time maybe to like,
it's like
get
a recalibration
feel back on everything. Yeah, totally.
That's my thinking. You know, it's kind of like the hitting version of Christian Camp. I was talking to people in the Red Sox at work, but like, he added so much bat speed and like increases attack angle so much that it literally took him like 5 months to recalibrate last year. So if you look at his like zone contact month over month last year, it's like this ladder where it just keeps going up. But initially everyone was like, what do they do? You know, he's swinging so hard, he's swinging out of shoes, and now he's like, he looks great now. But it's the same idea. Like I wonder if that applies to Horton in this case, where it's like, you know, he's 2 years removed from having these shapes back, which were his 23 shapes for the most part. So I wonder if it's just like, hey man, we got to like rein you in a little bit here. Like it's going to be a little wacky, but in the long term, this is going to make you a better pitcher.
Yeah. I'm glad Blade Tidwell popped here for you, because the Mets as an organization, we know with David Stearns at the helm there, they're basically going to replicate the Brewers pitching philosophy, the lab. They're going to have all of that, right? So you can err on the side of buying into guys that you like, and also just tell yourself the story. They're probably going to get the most out of their pitching for the first time in a long time. And Tidwell, like Horton, had more prospect value just like a year, 2 years ago, and now has kind of dipped on the radar because last year was a rough year for him. ERA close to 5 between AA and AAA combined. He was good at AA, just struggled with the move to AAA. For a guy that's always had high walk rates, I'm not that surprised. You get to ABS, and as you talked about on your YouTube channel, it's a new ball. You're using the major league ball for the first time when you reach the AAA level. So considering all the variables and what we know about Tidwell and the organization as a whole, like, even if it takes time, this seems like a profile that we might want to be patient with.
Yeah, I think the Mets are doing a great job on the pitching side. They're probably one of the more year over year, let's say since 2023, one of the teams that's definitely stocked up for me in terms of what they're doing. I think, you know, kind of alluded to them being like a multi-fastball approach team, which makes a lot of sense. But I think they're doing a great job of like optimizing sliders, throwing them hard. And they've had a lot of these guys kind of trickle up. Tidwell is weird to me. I was trying to find a way to pull up a plot, but everything he throws, Eno, is like above the zero line. But he's not like, usually when you see that, it's like the low slot guys, right? Think of like Rogers. Tyler, I don't remember which one from the Giants, but like everything he throws is lift because he's like under the ball. But Tidwell's like a big dude, high release, and he's like kind of over the top, and yet he doesn't really create depth. So like he doesn't, like his slider is like, I don't know if it's tagged as a curve, but I see more as a slider. Like it's a little bit of depth. I think it has like his lowest vert pitch is negative 1.5. You know, everything else he's throwing is like lift. Like his sweeper's got lift. It's got 7 inches of vertical break.
Oh, and he doesn't have a curve.
Yeah, it doesn't have
a gyro slider, a sweeper, a sinker that's probably more of a rider, a riding sinker, you know.
And he's got change too.
A four seam. So, but the change doesn't get that much depth, huh?
No, so he's got 7 inches of vertical break on average. Change is somewhere around. But you kind of have to adjust for slot here. So maybe he's doing a good job because he's a little bit of a higher slot guy. But he's weird.
He's
weird.
7 off of 18 or something.
Yeah, so I wonder whether your model's like picking up on some of the oddities with him. Which I think one of the things, like maybe we'll have a model conversation in the future, but I think your model's doing a great job of like highlighting weird dudes Because I'll often look at a guy and like look at a traditional stuff model and be like, they're missing like the body traits here. Like he's big, he's got low slot, so the release is artificially high. And then I look at your model and it's like, we love that shape. Like Alec Jacobs is a great example.
I think we're the only model
reliever.
we're the only model I think that has arm angle in it. So
yeah. Like Jacob is this 86 mile per hour.
Tidwell's results are not that great.
No, he walks a lot. This is always the fun part, right? It's like, the shapes look so good. And then it's like, he's running like a 14% walk rate, right?
It is. And that's too bad because I was just looking at Sproat, and I think I have Sproat figured out. Sproat is in the Will Warren, Clark Schmidt, Michael King tree. He's a sinker sweeper guy that is trying to push the other stuff to the point where it's competitive.
Agreed. Get on. I comp him occasionally to Brandon Fott, who's a little bit different, but because they both have that similar like lift sweeper, and they also look similar. They have like flowing brown hair, so I was looking at this. Sometimes the aesthetic comp is what sticks in my head.
So I guess I'm a little bit higher on Tidwell than the market because no one's really talking about him. And maybe a little bit lower on Sproat than the market because those sinker sweeper guys, we quoted from Keith Law where he's like he said something about like Will Warren is a future reliever no matter what your model says.
I was like, I like Will Warren. I was like, dang.
But if you think about these types of players, some of them work out. And Wisniewski's looking all right, and
Michael King is like the ultimate 99%.
Amazing, Clark's like maybe, and even Will Warren's doing all right, but I do tend to think that sometimes it takes a while because
I can totally see that.
You're asking them to figure out something against lefties. Basically, you're a sinker sweeper guy, and what are you doing against lefties? And you're just stressing about that, and you probably don't even see the highest quality lefty at batters until you get to the major leagues because there's not as many lefty bats in general as there are righty bats, and you're going to see poor lefty bats in the minors. So it's not until you're like, what am I going to do against Juan Soto? Or I guess he doesn't have to worry about that, but like, what am I going to do against Jazz Chisholm? What am I going to do against all these lefties that can take me yard? I can't throw them sinkers and sweepers. What do I do?
Sproat's a great example too of like recalibration in the minors. So last year he threw like 52% four seamer, and I think he jumped it to like 70% when he was behind in the count. Like in the minors, he was just like, these guys can't hit my four seam fastball. But the Mets are astute enough to be like, this is not going to work in the majors because your shape's actually not that good. He was a guy speaking the ball DVR
right now.
Yeah, like his shape. I don't know if I could pull up his shape in AA, but his shape in AA was like, whoa, he's low slot ride. And then like because he's so efficient, when he picked up the AAA ball, it was like, zoop, you're now like 13-8, and it's not good. And you better throw.
This is exactly what you're talking about with the ball.
Yeah. So let me see. I could try to pull up what his AA shape was, but let me see here.
88.
So I have him at 15 and 11 at 96.5. Okay, and that's like awesome. Like, this is fantastic. I'm so excited.
Yeah, 15 inches of ride. Just to give like, what does Warren or let me see, what does King have? King throws his four seam fastball. And he's a sinker sweeper guy at heart, and he has on his four seam he got up to 17.6, but last year he had 15. Basically, Sproat in AA had King's four seam fastball from last year.
Yeah, and he's got a bad average release, but this year you see at AAA he's 13-10 basically. So like the vert cut off that pitch, which really kills these guys who are like super efficient. So eventually, like we're going to tease it, but like I eventually think we're going to try to come up with a AA and high A model based off some data I have at those levels. And like one of the things I think we're going to have to do is make a ball adjustment, which is maybe is a part of the like your A ball data. One of the reasons I said like I just don't want to touch it too much is because of that, because I think like all those stuff numbers are probably inflated. So you got to make adjustments. I've talked to some other orgs about this. A lot of them like do get on this early. I've heard too like the seam effects on the ball are different. So like it just because of the leather, like the minor league balls are made in China, the major league ones are made in Costa Rica. So there's a difference in literally how the ball interacts with the air, and that messes seam effects up. So there's certain orgs that separate movement out between like the Magnus side and the seam effect side. So I was talking to one org that was like, yeah, we've seen pitches, especially on changeups and sinkers, that are like getting drop and getting arm side from seam effects. And then what happens with the major league ball is they pick up a ton more drop and lose that arm side. So they have to kind of recalibrate the orientation and the movement. So like this makes some of the minor league analysis
exhausting
so
to think about being a director of pitching.
I can't even imagine. And the funny thing too is like some teams don't even, and it's one of those things. Like I talked to some teams that don't even have a model for it, don't even care, and it's like I don't know. Like, and some of those teams are actually I thought kind of sharp, where they're just like we're just going to figure it out when the guy gets to AAA. But I do think there's an edge, like to a team like the Mets, who I think understand this stuff and can tackle it ahead of time. And, just create softer landings for pitchers, I think.
I wonder if I was a major league team, what about sending a bunch of major league balls to my minor league complexes so that at least when they're doing bullpens and they're in spring and stuff, that they're all using major league balls. And then, your pitching coach can say, hey, listen, when we were doing this in spring, it had this movement profile, and maybe it's not working for you right now, but the model says that what you're doing right now, once you get to use that major league ball, it's going to work. But that's like a really hard thing to tell a kid to like throw this pitch that's getting, shoved in your face.
Especially if the kid's like, am I going to get promoted if I do this? And
right.
You know what I mean? So I want to get out of this high A team and go to the double A.
Supposed to move better, and so that you're going to promote me, or is it just going to say, no, you still got your face shoved in? So.
Lance did a great job breaking this down in detail on his YouTube channel, so you should definitely check out the full video explaining the differences between the ball. And I think the frustrating part of it for me is that it comes down to money. This comes down to saving money. Could they make more Major League Baseballs and use them throughout the minor leagues? Of course they could. It's Major League Baseball. They just increase manufacturing, right? It's possible.
You're like they could save. This is like, this is on the order of millions of dollars, but it's not $100 million. It's, they're saving maybe $2-3 million a year, which sounds like a lot, but it was a guesstimation. But it sounds like a lot, but is it a lot? I don't know.
I want, it's one of those things. It's like, I very much am a voice, I think, for a lot of people in pitching departments, because who I enjoy talking to. I'm sure you're the same way, and such. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm a champion for them. Like if people complain to me about this, then I become interested and want to do something about it in video form or whatever. I wonder how many people who actually deal with like the manufacturing of the balls even know about this. You know what I mean? Like, do they even care? Like, like anyone who's on the operations side of like making this decision. Because actually, from my understanding, I didn't mention in the video, but I do believe that there was a proposal to at least start using the major league balls at AA. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of an in-betweener, right? Where it's like, okay, now if I have a college guy and I don't want to expose him to the minor league ball and I think he's good enough, he's just right to AA. He doesn't need to go to Class A, doesn't need to go to High A, whatever. So he skirts over all these ball adjustments and such. And my understanding is that got shot down. I don't entirely know why, but that's the point. It's like, I don't know if like you sit down the decision makers in the room and you're showing them the graphs of how a guy loses 2 inches of vert and they're like, it's 2 inches. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, how does that conversation go with the league?
How do they, and it also,
I have so many more things to care about than this,
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it brings up the question of like, who is the customer and who is the provider and who's the customer. So Major League Baseball providing balls to teams, for the minor leagues, and then who's paying whom and like who cares about what, you know what I mean? Like,
that's a great point.
And so is this like a service that MLB gives the owners, and the owners are like, yeah, save me the $2 million, thank you. Yep.
As I said in my video, that's a whole Mike Talkman right there. Come on.
Right. Or do you go, or does the general manager in on any of these meetings? The general manager's like, I would pay $2 million to know what all my guys' pitches would do in the major leagues.
Yeah.
Because there's like definitely like in New York, the guys, Steve Cohen's like, yo, I would rather know, I'd rather know.
You can convince Cohen. I'm not sure you can convince like Monfort in the Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that might be the challenge. Getting Nutting and Dick Monfort on board with the
Angels
extra expense.
Good luck.
That could be a challenge. One more question we had for you, Lance. With any edge that a team comes into, how long does an edge last in today's game, given how sharp the league is?
It's a great question. I'm glad we're bearing this at the end of this podcast, because I don't think I have a great answer for you. Because I thought about this all night. Like I saw that message from Eno and I was like thinking about it at work. And then I woke up this morning and I was thinking about it. This tells you how much of a psychopath I am. But it's a great point. I almost wanted to zig here and say that I think I think edges last a little longer than we think because of how hard it is for, if we're talking macro level, for teams to recalibrate. Like a lot of that recalibration is done through acquisitions in the offseason, draft, etc. And like the draft happens middle of the year. Most of the time, from my understanding, those guys aren't making big adjustments when they get into an org. So it's usually that off season. So my initial impression was like, I actually think you can get like a calendar year out of an edge. And then it's in that off season recalibration of like the Cubs turned over a ton of 40-man guys this offseason and stuff. So that's when you start to see maybe, okay, we did this in the past, but we're churning a bunch of these pitchers. Let's see what the new philosophy is. That's implemented. Then you see aggregated next year data, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. They're, the Mariners have the lowest four-seam rate in the minors, the lowest slots, the biggest sweepers, et cetera. Like clearly that team is doing something very specific in terms of the slots they want. But my gut was that I think that some of these edges on the very zoomed out level last a year or so. But I don't know, on an individual pitcher level, like what we're talking about, the usage and new pitch and shape change, and like that stuff seems to be maybe more in like the month to 2 month window. So I think they're very different beasts in that.
Advanced scouts are on. They know everything we've just talked about. Like they're all over it. They've got people watching it. They've got advanced scout analysts now that are just doing a lot of what you do. We were talking about like running stuff differentials. Like they'll like advanced scout analysts will be like, we'll just run that and like, are there any big movement changes? And then and see if anybody they're facing soon is popping on the list and be like, oh wow, Dylan sees changeup plus 8 miles an hour plus minus this. Like, got to get that down to the hitting coach, and so. That I think you're right, that kind of edge. But I was thinking a little bit more about organizational edge. And one story I can tell is that in October or August, no, later, it was October 2021. I wrote a piece called "Is There a Dodger Slider?" And it was, I had been following Barton Smith's work on seam shift wake, and one thing that I had realized from his work was it wasn't all about sinkers and changes. They were actually breaking balls that benefited from seam shift wake. And that there was one he called, I think, a looper. And the looper, was like, I was like looking at the Dodgers, like Evan Phillips throws a looper, And so I started to look at, low fastball spin efficiency guys that the Dodgers had picked up that they were giving these horizontal sliders to. And I was like, Urias had like a little bit more of a downer, like 12-6 curveball, and his over time became a sweeper. And I just like broke it down. I was like, I think the Dodgers are doing something with sliders. Their sliders are all horizontal, and it looks a little bit like the seam shift wake looper. That's October 2021. And I just checked with Corey Schwartz for another story because I was doing about the kick change. This is why I was asking like these edges, how long do they last? And for the kick change, I asked StatCast about when they made a decision to make a sweeper designation. And that was in 2023. So October 21 is the end of the 21 season. By a year later, StatCast is already making a new pitch type designation for that pitch. So by the time StatCast is announcing, hey, there's a sweeper and this is exactly how many people are throwing it, I feel like that edge is gone. It's kind of, we always have a use case there. So kick change, first heard about it from Hayden Birdsong last August. I was wondering if like maybe things are getting faster though, because like I wrote about it last August, and this spring we had like 20 guys throwing kick changes.
I think the key is that off season though, like Lance was saying. I think the off season is when all of the ideas that were gathered or new things that happened over the course of a season, they get put into action. People start trying things in various
because during the season it's just like, we need to win tomorrow.
It's much more survival and like
always the pushback I get.
And sticking to the things you believe in, right? You don't want to abandon your identity as a player.
Yeah, like every month
on the fly. That'd be pretty catastrophic.
We're all doing kick changes, guys.
Yeah. Some orgs did that with the sweeper though. I'm sure you noticed.
Yes, they did.
Right?
Yeah.
There's definitely a couple teams that were
Mariners,
like, oh my God, you tell me that you can cue curveball with this grip. And it's like you're taking all these efficient guys and they're just like, throw sweeper. And this shape looks terrible. It doesn't work. The guy gets hurt. And it's like, all right, we're reeling this back.
Yeah, you don't want to live that way. It's not a good way to live.
No.
I wonder if there's some org is like, hey, everyone check out the kick change. Try it.
Yeah. Just spike your finger, everyone, on your changeup.
Yeah.
I think they were doing that in the offseason. I think that's why we have that influx of kick changes here to begin the 2025 season. Lance, before we let you go, let our listeners again know where they can find all your great work.
Yeah, YouTube and Substack are two things I'm grinding this year. Both Lance BROZ. Yeah, the Substack's usually daily, 6 days a week or so. Usually my thoughts on pitching. YouTube's a little more in-depth, weekly, diving into topics that are fun and giving my thoughts on pitchers. And then MarqueeSportsNetwork.com, Marquee Sports Network app. I do a lot of stuff as well if you're a Cubs fan. I know DVR will not be downloading that and looking, but that's okay. Still love you, DVR.
I will not have the Marquee app. I love your work,
okay,
Lance, but that's my limit. That's where I stop. I can't do that.
I've often said to people that if you want the simplest, low techiest way to like identify if a pitcher's changed something, mix is the thing. Like you just look at because that's on Fangraphs everywhere. It's like how many they threw last year, how many they threw this. If it's really different, then maybe you can believe the change. And your Substack is who's throwing new pitches. It's almost the most basic, like every day. It's really important to stay on top of that. And that is a great way to be like, oh, this player's changed, did this player just get hot? Or like, is there something really different about what they're doing? And so I'm a reader and I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's an essential tool. We appreciate your time and your insight, Lance. And you're also on Bluesky as well. All the socials, like you said, Lance Braz. You can find Eno Saris.bsky.social. I'm DVR.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.